We all think war is about soldiers, strategy, and weapons. But what if I told you the most powerful weapon in any war isn't a missile or a tank, but a government credit card? Because behind every conflict, there's a hidden economic battle being fought, and it's almost always funded by one thing. And that's debt. Welcome to Cultural Capital TV, where psychology, money, culture, and history meet. Because nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on how governments have paid for wars. From the American Civil War to the recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we'll discover a pattern that never changes. Wars are bought on credit, and we, the public, are the ones who pay the bill for generations. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a financial survival guide to understanding how these decisions shape our economy and our lives. Let's travel back to 1860. The United States government was relatively small, with a national debt of about $65 million. But then, the Civil War erupted. Just 3 years later, by 1863, that debt had skyrocketed to over $1 billion. How did that happen so fast? The government couldn't just raise taxes to cover the astronomical costs. That would have been politically disastrous. So it turned to a new playbook for modern war finance. First, it issued massive amounts of bonds, essentially borrowing money from its own citizens and foreign investors with a promise to pay it back later with interest. Second, it printed money, the famous greenbacks, which weren't backed by gold or silver. This led to massive inflation, which is a hidden tax. When the government prints money, the value of every dollar in your pocket goes down. The cost of the war wasn't paid up front. It was shifted onto future generations and subtly extracted from the public through the erosion of their savings. This set a precedent. When faced with a crisis, governments learned it's far easier to borrow now and worry about the consequences later. This created a long-term burden of interest payments and fiscal stress that would haunt the nation for decades. Fast forward to the 20th century. The scale of warfare exploded with World War I and World War II, and so did the financial machinery needed to support them. Governments once again turned to the public, but this time with a powerful marketing campaign. Liberty bonds in the United States and similar war bonds in other countries weren't just financial instruments. They were a call to patriotic duty. Posters and rallies urged every citizen to do their part by loaning money to the government. It was an incredibly effective way to raise vast sums of cash quickly. But bonds were only part of the story. Taxation also played a much bigger role. For instance, the modern income tax was significantly expanded in the U.S. during World War I to help fund the war effort. Still, even with higher taxes and massive bond sales, it wasn't enough. Debt soared. In the UK, the national debt more than doubled after the 7 Years' War. And by the end of World War II, U.S. national debt was at its highest point in history relative to the size of the economy. After the fighting stopped, these governments were left with mountains of debt. They had a few options: raise taxes even higher on a war-weary population, default on their debts, which would ruin their credit, or inflate the debt away by printing more money. Most chose a combination of all three. The interest payments on this war debt became a permanent fixture in national budgets, competing for funds that could have gone to schools, hospitals, or infrastructure. Now we enter the modern era, with the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the broader post-9/11 conflicts. You think we would have learned our lesson, right? Wrong. The funding model shifted again, but this time it became even less visible to the public. Unlike World War II, where everyone was asked to sacrifice through rationing, war bonds, and high taxes, the post-9/11 wars were funded almost entirely through borrowing. There were no major tax hikes. There were no patriotic bond drives. Instead, the government put it all on the national credit card. According to the Costs of War Project at Brown University, the U.S. has spent or obligated over $8 trillion on these wars since 2001. Out of that massive sum, more than $1 trillion is just interest payments on the money borrowed. This is what's known as invisible war debt. The The fighting might be happening overseas, but the financial consequences are right here at home, woven into our national budget. These costs don't end when the troops come home. They include decades of veterans' care and disability benefits, which are long-term obligations that will continue to grow. This isn't just an American phenomenon. For example, in 2024, Israel's war spending caused its debt-to-GDP ratio to jump significantly, funded largely by issuing bonds. The modern method is to defer the costs, hiding them in complex budget lines and pushing the financial burden so far into the future that most people don't connect their rising taxes or reduced public services to military decisions made years or even decades earlier. So let's break down the mechanics. How exactly do governments pull this off? There are 4 main tools in their war funding toolbox. The first is war bonds. As we saw, this involves selling debt directly to the public, often using patriotic appeals. It's effective because it makes people feel like they're contributing to the war effort while also getting a financial return. The second tool is direct taxation. This is the most honest and transparent way to fund a war. The government simply raises taxes on income, goods, or businesses. But it's also the most politically difficult, because nobody likes paying higher taxes, especially for a long and costly conflict. The third and most common tool is borrowing through government securities. The government issues bonds to large investors, banks, and even foreign countries. This is like using a credit card to pay for a massive expense. It provides immediate cash, but it pushes the real cost, plus interest into the future. Finally, there's the stealthiest tool, money printing, which leads to inflation. When a central bank creates more money to buy government debt, it devalues the currency. Your money is worth less, so prices for everything go up. It's a hidden tax that disproportionately hurts savers and those on fixed incomes. Once the war is over, the debt doesn't just disappear. The interest payments, or debt servicing, become a recurring line item in the national budget. Every year, a chunk of taxpayer money has to go toward paying interest on past wars. This money can't be used for education, healthcare, infrastructure, or scientific research. When the government funds wars with debt, it can lead to inflation, meaning your grocery bill goes up and your savings are worth less. It eventually leads to higher taxes down the road because that debt has to be paid back. It also means there's less money available for the things we all rely on. Every $1 billion spent on interest payments for past wars is $1 billion not spent on fixing roads, improving schools, or funding medical research. When you hear politicians debating the national debt or the federal budget, what they're often really talking about are the long-term consequences of past spending decisions, with war being one of the biggest drivers. Understanding this connection is empowering. It allows you to see behind the headlines and ask the right questions. When you hear about a new military intervention or a defense budget increase funded by borrowing, you'll know what that really means. A bigger bill for the future. It's not just about foreign policy. It's about your financial future. Having this knowledge means you can push for more transparency and hold leaders accountable for the true, full cost of war. To recap, from the Civil War's greenbacks to the invisible debt of the Iraq War, the playbook has remained remarkably consistent. Wars are financed by debt, not paid for in cash. The methods have evolved from public war bonds to complex government borrowing, but the result is the same. The financial burden is deferred, shifted, and ultimately paid by citizens for generations to come through inflation, higher taxes, and reduced public services. The cost of war isn't just measured in lives lost on the battlefield. It's also measured in trillions of dollars of debt that shape our economy for decades. If you found this breakdown helpful, leave a comment below. What war costs surprised you the most? And make sure to subscribe for more deep dives where history, money, and culture meet. Remember, knowledge of war financing is knowledge of power. Don't just watch history happen. Understand how it's paid for. Thanks for watching.